So we'll start with refuge once in English, and then we'll do it twice in Tibetan. I'll go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. Sangye chodang soki chognam la changchu bardu dagni kyapsuchi dagi chenyan gipe sonam ki jola penchu sangye drupa sho sangye chodang soki chognam la changchu bardu dagni kyapsuchi dagi chenyan gipe sonam ki Jola Penchu Sangye Drupa Sho. So let's just take a minute to arrive. And by the way, I hear a puppy going for refuge. and I no, I love that. I love that. That's real life, right? So thank you. So let's just take a minute to quiet our minds and we've talked about motivation, and I think this is the time, before we start class, actually kind of thinking about the highest reasons for being here. And as I've said every time, I think there's layers of reasons why we would be here tonight, and layers of good reasons. And then I think for most people, there is a highest reason. As a Buddhist, there's this idea that we could perfect ourselves in a way that would help us to help every other living being, becoming a Buddha. So sometimes it's really hard to connect with that aspiration because we have, even if we have seemingly, some people have huge egos, it's just a flip side of low self-esteem, right? It's all from feeling small. So sometimes it's hard to tap into that. But I like to just, let ourselves wish, literally have the wish and the thought of how wonderful it would be if we could truly help, if we could not seemingly have to be concerned with ourselves so much, if we had limitless resources that we could bring to bear in helping other living beings to be happy and free from suffering. And just kind of maybe fantasize just for a minute about what that would feel like, and allow that to be our motivation for being here tonight. Like maybe, what if this could help me? May that be so. Like that's my motivation. So let's take a few minutes and try to really connect with that highest aspiration that may be deep in our hearts. And then when you're ready, you can open your eyes and we'll start our discussion. Before moving on, so my thought today was to talk about, and it's, I'm going to try to do this talk about probably two of the most challenging topics in one evening. So, I no pretense. It's going to be a primer. And I really do want to connect it back to how these ideas can be helpful also in the here and now. In addition to connecting us to these higher aspirations. But I wanted to pause first, just to see if there was anything in the previous weeks that have maybe come up, or if there were questions or, comments, or I don't know, anything that's come up from anything that we've discussed up to this point, before we kind of launch into something new. And it's okay if there's not, but I just want to create the space, In person, it's so easy to interject, or I could look at someone and see like, oh, they have a question, or, so I just want to make sure that there's space for that. And feel free at any time, raise your hand, or, just unmute yourself and stop me, if you like. So today, I wanted to talk a bit about karma, because it's one of those things. The idea of karma gets tossed around, and a lot of times we don't. I mean, we know in essence, right? It's like, oh, you get what you plant. So, in that regard. But I sometimes hear people, use it as like, well, that's their karma, or, they'll get theirs kind of an idea, which I think is always kind of unfortunate, because actually wishing that someone gets theirs is a really negative karma for us. Rejoicing in that would not be good. But I wanted to talk just because it's not some new agey thought, and there's very, what I consider to be very logical explanation of kind of what the principles of karma, how it ripens, what the elements of a karmic path, like a completing a full karma, like planting a full seed, you could think of it like that. And then how we can purify and basically rip out karmas that we're not happy with, right? Like that thing I did 3 years ago before I knew better, or that thing I did 10 minutes ago and I did know better, but I just was, I don't know, on the crazy train. What can I do to, now that I know, like, oh, these things are heavy, what can I do to remedy that? So wanted to talk about those things. So to start with, I'll say, and I think I've said this before in other classes, but, we talked about 3 principal paths here, aspects of the path, 3 realizations that we have to develop in our mind on the way, or that will be developed in our minds on the way to Buddhahood. And that's renunciation, bodhicitta, and then wisdom, you could say. And then there's also, so Dharma is always like carved out in these like topics, or but the whole path can be contained in there. But you might have heard people talk about the 3 baskets, or the 3 trainings that are part of the Buddhist canon. So the first is morality, and this is really connected to karma. It's like what to do and what not to do. Some things are quite obvious, and actually that's a good thing, and it's because we have what we call a precious human rebirth. One of the things about this precious human rebirth is that we are actually born in a world that, for all of its, we can say, immorality, all of its cruelties, injustice, all of its negativities and non-virtue, still at the core, like as a human, as a world, like we would not say that killing is good. We all would say that it doesn't mean that nobody kills, but we would not promote that that's a good thing to do. Or stealing, or sexual misconduct. There's, the perfections, the non-virtues and the virtues, for the most part, you see them in every spiritual path, every religion. And, we could argue, we could kind of dissect and find where they're different. But for the most part, there's some things that we're all sort of in agreement on. And you could say some things could be boiled down to the golden rule, right, in relationship to others. So some things are very obvious, but then there's other things that are not so obvious. And those are, why we would go to a Buddhist class and maybe go into, why certain things that seemingly don't hurt anyone might be a negative seed. So I guess it's important also to say that Buddhist morality is not arbitrary. It's really just based on what's going to give me a good result. It's very functional. So it's not like judging like you're a bad person. It really is like, well, that would not, you want to be happy. We all want to be happy. Every living being, every living being wants to be happy and free from suffering. And so then, a Buddha who has omniscience can see that thing you just did that you think is giving you some kind of short-term happiness. Actually, the short-term happiness that you're experiencing came from a good deed that you did, I don't know, 2 lifetimes ago. But what you just did is actually planting something that's going to create suffering for you in the future. So it is a thing that is not something that we can see immediately. And I said this last week, only a Buddha can see karma in action. So morality is an important thing to study, what to take up, what to do, and then what to not do. And then the second basket is meditative concentration. So, you learn the things to do and not to do, morality. You learn to quiet your mind and then to analyze things. So, developing both shamatha, shine, and vipassana. And then the last path is wisdom, which is very connected to the meditation, because you need that platform of meditation to be able to actually see emptiness directly or to see reality. And each one of those things builds on each other. And I think we know that intuitively as well. How does morality feed our meditation or concentration practice? I mean, if you imagine you go to a party and you're having a good time, but you're not watching your speech. I can say this is not like a situation that's never happened to me. And I, nothing terrible, but maybe I say a few gossipy things or whatever, doing things that are not aligned with how I want to be in the world, the kind of person that I want to be. And then I come home at the end of the night and then I replay those conversations over and over. So it's like these bad deeds. And I can say, as a Buddhist, and since I've been practicing, I sleep so much better. It's not like I never have those evenings where I review like, oh God, I can't believe I did, or I can't believe I said X, Y, Z. But less and less of those, right? So the morality actually affords us that quietude of mind to be able to reflect, because there's something in us that knows when we've done something that isn't good. A conscience. Even people who don't look like they have a conscience have this thing. And then, quieting our mind down allows us the space to touch reality, ultimately to touch reality. But in the short term, just looking at our situation and peeling away the layers so that we really understand ourselves and our own mind, which is the Buddhist path. I went, there was an anniversary of Lama Yeshe's parinirvana back in March at Vajrapani. And Lama Osel and Yangtze Rinpoche, both in different ways, were talking about how therapy, in essence, you could say therapy is the job of a Buddhist, doing therapy to ourselves, like understanding our own minds. I wish I had some of the quotes. It just came up for me. I'd love to kind of share some of those, but this is the path. So understanding then why the gravity of what we do, and also understanding that, and I think I said this before, we're sitting in a Buddhist class. We're not people who are probably, and maybe we have in the course of our lives, but I would say probably not now, engaging in any heavy, negative, non-virtuous behaviors. Probably not. But so we can feel, good about that. But when you understand how karma works, the laws of karma, then you start to, it can actually be a little bit of a bummer. It can, or a big bummer. Because now it's like, oh, every thought, every word, every deed, all it are seeds that are planted. So but then the good news is there is a way to rip those out. So the seed analogy, and I'm sorry, a couple of you have kind of heard me talk about this a little bit before. The seed analogy is a really good analogy for karma. Because in the same way that we plant something and do things to fertilize and nurture that seed so that the plant grows big and healthy and strong, and we get the most yield from it. In the same way that we do that, that's how we create karma. But then also, if we wanted, we have weeds in the garden, things that we don't want, then we can very methodically go about purifying those things and getting rid of those. So I wanted to talk about, you could say 4x4. So the 4 principles of karma, the 4 different ways that it ripens, the 4 aspects or elements of a karmic path, like what make a karma complete, and then the 4 powers, opponent powers, the 4 ways that we can work to purify things that we're not happy that we planted. So, and again, this is just like a primer, but I think it's helpful to just have it in your head, like to really know, like, this is when you hear karma, this is what we're talking about. And it gives you just more information, like a better understanding of what it is. So the 4 principles are just like a physical seed. The first one is that karma is certain. It's definite, meaning like for like. So if I plant a watermelon seed, I will not get tomatoes. It's like that is certain. The second thing is that karma grows. So just like a physical seed, it doesn't, we don't have to go out and kill to experience being greatly harmed or killed, right? It can be something much smaller. So karma grows. And then the last 2 are interesting. If you don't plant the seed, then you will not get the result, which seems like a no-brainer. But how many times do we, wish for something, or we say we wish for something, and even that is a seed, kind of, right? But we wish for something, but if we never do anything to create that thing, then we're never going to experience the results. It's like, oh, I'd love to be, enlightened, but then I don't do anything at all. Then you have to actually even ask, how much do I really want to be enlightened? I think that's the other thing, right? Like, how much do you really want it? Because we know what we want. We all really know what we want. And how we know is we can look at what we do with our day. It tells us what we want. Now, we could be mistaken. We could be going down a path pursuing something that isn't going to give us what we want. But in our own minds, that's where we're putting our energy, our time and our energy. And then the last one is, if you, and this is the good thing too, if you plant it. So all of these are kind of double-edged, there's a good upside and a downside. But if you plant the seed, you must get a result. You absolutely will get a result. Now, let's talk about how the results ripen, right? And then how we really effectively plant a seed, right? Because I feel like an idiot to confess this, but at one point in my adult life, I bought a bunch of like wildflower seeds, and I just kind of tossed them around this area where I thought, oh, I see wildflowers all the time. This is something I could probably just, and it, there was soil, and but I didn't plant it, and I didn't really do anything. And of course, the birds just came and ate all the seeds. So right away, I'm like, okay, that didn't work. I can't believe I'm an adult woman and I just scattered seeds. Maybe I got something out of it. I don't remember getting anything at all. But I do remember coming out and seeing birds eating, and then it was gone. So I didn't correctly plant the seed. So let's talk about the ways that the elements of a karmic path. So the first is there's some kind of an object that we identify correctly. So there's the object that we're interacting with. It doesn't have to be an external object. A thought can also be an object, right? The second thing is motivation. Sempa, the state of mind when we're doing an action. And then you have jorwa, the act itself, like the deed, whatever the deed is. And then the last one is taking like a mental, emotional ownership of the deed. So doing it and then kind of like, yeah, I've done that, check. It doesn't mean like having a party, but just being glad that we did it. Like, okay, I did this. And not feeling bad about having done it. So, or good about having done it. So these can be negative karmas or positive karmas, right? So the act that we could be doing, many things we do are kind of neutral, but they're tainted with ignorance. So, but and that's a negative thing also. So we have to have those 4 elements. And then I'm trying to decide which is more interesting to or what order would be most beneficial to talk about kind of how karma ripens. So we have the 4 principles, we have the 4 elements of a karmic path, and now the 4 ways that things ripen. Again, when you hear it, you'll say, oh, that's intuitive, but it is something to actually know that these are the teachings. It can ripen as your rebirth. And that's actually called a ripened karma. That's a fully ripened karma. It is a life that you take. It's a rebirth. The second way that karma can ripen is as a corresponding experience. So I did something and I experienced something of the same flavor, something similar. The third thing is corresponding habit. So, and this is, I think for me, this is really the insidious one, is like, habits can be so hard to break. So, I do something and we can experience this immediately. And then, oh, I keep doing this same thing or same kind of thing, right? And then the last way that it ripens is your environment. So this is like physically the environment that you're in. Are you in a place where there's famine? Are you in a place where there's war? Like, it's all those kinds of details of your life. You've also probably heard of finishing karma and projecting karma, or throwing karma. Like, so one is the one that throws you into your next life or results in a rebirth, and the other is like all the details of that rebirth. That would be this 4th one, what the environment is like. So, I don't know about you. You're probably all much better human beings than I am. But when I first really, really contemplated these teachings and looked back on my life and thought about just all of the, again, not huge, big, evil karmas, but all the little crap, the tiny, petty unkindnesses, that came from jealousy or, some kind of crazy competition. That was always a big one, just many, 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 many things. Disrespect, so many things that I had done that I really regretted. And it created a great deal of anxiety. And I've met a lot of like new Buddhists over the course of since I've been practicing, and I can see like so much like anxiety sometimes. They get these teachings and then they feel like, oh gosh, instead of, it can go one or two ways, right? Oh, I'm so excited and there's this potential I could become a Buddha. I have the ingredients. Um I it's possible for me to become a perfectly enlightened being and have complete love for every other living creature. Um, that's uplifting, but also conversely is like this heaviness of like, wow, there's not anything that just doesn't matter. There's not, you know, a hateful thought that crosses my mind in a room all alone matters. And so this is why, you know, in another class we talked about like 8 verses, and one of them is, when a negative thought comes, I'm going to actually firmly confront and avert it. I'm going to address that negative thought. I'm going to nip it in the bud, which is so different than, again, I can only speak for myself, but not liking someone, say I'm jealous or whatever, and allowing myself to take an inventory of all their negative qualities, and then wishing some negative, nothing like, I'm not wishing them death, right? But this is the thing, wishing yucky things to happen to them, oh, that person's a jerk, I hope they get fired. That's someone's livelihood. The crazy stupid thoughts that over the course of my life at different times have gone through my head in relation to someone else, suddenly understanding that those things carry great gravity, they because karma grows. And if you think about, like an oak seed, or I love redwood, the first time I ever got a teaching on this was at Vajrapani Institute in California, and we're surrounded by these huge redwood trees. And then, if you look at a redwood seed, it's almost like the size of an apple seed. It's the tiniest little thing, but it has this huge result. So that can be very disturbing, because even in this life, I've certainly planted enough tiny little apple seeds of negativity to give me one heck of a redwood grove, right? So the upside is I was taught these 4 powers. So you probably, maybe you've heard the 4 opponent powers, and they're fantastic because these are the ways that we can go about purifying negativities. So the first, and I always use them with R's because it's easy for me to remember. Michael, I think you had one R that was a little different from mine, but I think in another class you have the same thing. Like there's 4 R's. So the first is refuge. So the first is regret. Well, the first is refuge. Sorry. So understanding that there is such a thing as karma, that my actions do have results. That's refuge. And because of that, I have regret. I regret negative things that I've said or done or thought. And if I really regret something, then I want to do something about it. So the third one is remedy. And then the last one is resolve. So what that looks like is kind of just what I said, in terms of, because we understand karma and emptiness, we have, even if it's an infantile understanding that I have some feeling of it, some understanding, that what I do is what has created my world and my circumstances, and it matters. So because of that, I have regret. And regret here is so different from guilt. And I said before, Buddhist morality is functional. There's not a sense of like, these suffering beings are bad, or that we're better than them. It is just functional. So Buddhist regret, like healthy regret, is, they say that great analogy is, if you took poison, if you accidentally ate something or drank something that was poisonous, and you found out it was poison, you would not like self-flagellate. You would not like, oh, I'm a terrible person. You wouldn't, you might think 1 second, like, oh my God, that was so crazy or so stupid. Like, I regret it. That's the feeling. It's like, oh, that was crazy. Like, that was a mistake. That's it. Not nothing else, nothing more than that. This was a mistake. And the next thing is a remedy. Okay, so just like with the poison, what am I going to do now? I made this mistake. I ingested this poison. What can I do? Run to the emergency room, take an antidote. This is the same thing. It's take an antidote, do something, a remedy, like to make up for it, to counterbalance what the negative thing that you did was. And it can be, meditating on karma, doing class. I'm dedicating this class towards these, as a remedy. I'm taking these classes as a remedy for things that I've done in the past. May I have the wisdom not to do them in the future. That's, it can be something like that, right? It can also be very directly like, oh, I did something, I had a jealous or a stupid thought in relation to this person. I'm going to do a nice thing. One thing I'll say about that, though, is, well, we'll talk a little bit. It is better to do less, but to do things that we can do happily and feel happy about. So like that full karmic path, if I do this thing, say that I have a problem with jealousy, like a big problem, and maybe it's a particular person seems to happen all the time. You could say, oh, a great remedy would be to go and apologize to that person, or to, do some makeup thing for that person. The problem is, and again, all these are related to the things that I've just talked about today. There's the corresponding habit. So, okay, so and so has been really a challenge for me, and it seems like they've made my life challenging. I own that I've done things in the past, whatever, that have created this. I want to do a remedy. So I'm going to go and I'm going to extend an olive branch to this person, which is all great, provided that person accepts the olive branch. Like, what if they don't? What if they're actually even nastier? What if they're like, oh yeah, I knew you were wrong. My old habit or way of thinking can come up, and then I can regret the thing that was a remedy. And we already talked about regret is a poison to karmic seeds. So this also, all of these things work in a positive and a negative way. I want to stop. Well, I'll just go ahead and say the very last one of the 4 powers is resolve, which is to resolve, to refrain from refrain from doing something for some reasonable period of time. And it's super important that you choose a period of time that you can actually hold, because we're not going to, we could try to accomplish the job of enlightenment tonight. I don't want to be a downer, but I don't think it's going to happen. So like, this is like, we're in this for the long haul. So if I resolve, if I have a habit of doing something, if I have a habit of telling white lies, if I have a habit, and I like vow never to do it again, what I'm probably going to do is do it again. And now I've just added to that I made a vow not to do it. Now I've broken that vow, and that's a negative thing. So I don't want this class to be negative, because there's a lot to be hopeful about when we really understand these things. Like, but also, so now now we're empowered. When we know just this much, we're empowered because I can look back at everything that I can recall. And I can also look at every negative thing I'm experiencing. Oh, this is the other beauty. So because of the way karma ripens, there's actually so much. This is not one class. This is a whole course. Because of the way karma ripens, I can look at things that are happening to me and I can correctly deduce that I must have done something like that in the past. Otherwise, there's absolutely no way this would be happening to me today. Now, keeping in mind, it grows. Keeping in mind our working hypothesis that there are past and future lives, which, if we could just take that as a in good faith working hypothesis. So I actually had a situation. It's quite a while ago. And I think I've shared it maybe once before in one of these classes, but I had a person who was just really challenging, and I was trying to like serve that person and, provide a Dharma center and like all these projects and things that I was doing. And this person was like always having a problem with me. And I remember talking to Venerable Rabina, and she's like, "Are you doing 4 powers?" And I was like, "Of course I'm doing 4 powers. Like, I'm a Buddhist. I know I am doing 4 powers. Yeah. I, go for refuge, regret. I'm, doing some kind of remedy. I'm doing all these nice things. I'm trying to, and, I'm resolving not to engage in this behavior." But when I really thought about it, after I told her that, "Oh yes, of course I'm doing it." Your advice is not helpful. Of course I'm doing 4 powers. Then I sit back and I start thinking, and if I'm honest, I did not regret, because I really, really could not see what I had done to create it. And I think this is so often our situation. Like, it doesn't look like I did anything to deserve what I'm getting. But if I'm intelligent, spiritually intelligent, and I'm taking this past and future lives as a working hypothesis, the very fact that this stuff is happening to me is absolutely proof that I have done something similar in the past. And now I can actually generate genuine regret, and regret for the ignorance that I had of not even getting that, really feeling like it was coming from nowhere and had nothing to do with me. And so I did 4 powers then, taking ownership. I know this can be hard, but it's so amazingly empowering. Taking ownership over what was happening to me. Taking ownership over what someone else was doing to me. Because I knew I must have created the causes. I must have planted those seeds. And I really do regret them. I really was able to do regret. And I will tell you that immediately after, it really did shift the situation with this person. Then I'll also tell you that it only shifted it for about 6 months. and then we're right back where we started from. But I had learned something, right? I had learned something. So knowing these things, it's we can transform and we can use as spiritual fuel negative things that are happening to us. Because if we understand how karma works, now it's not like I'm a martyr or anything. It's like, wow, whew, I don't even know what I did, but I know I must have done something. I know I must have done something similar. Not because I'm a bad person. This is not like that horrible feeling of like saying, terrible things happen to someone and like, oh, well, they deserved it. They planted it. I mean, I can't fathom being able to walk away from hearing all this and feeling that way. But maybe if I've done a crappy job of describing it, I guess that would be possible. It's not like that. But personally, it's never about looking out at what is happening to someone else and saying they deserve it like that. There is no place. I used to say Buddhist morality only applies to one person in the entire universe. Me. That's it. It's not a yardstick to judge anyone else. Really, not even close. It's not a thing. If I know something more than someone else, if I have some kind of wisdom to abstain from doing something negative, then I should just feel gratitude also, towards Joe, the karmic ancestor who planted the seeds for me to have that kind of wisdom today. Like I don't have to punish myself or feel like a bad person. And I also can't really build up much ego either, because like I'm experiencing the right. Okay, so that was a bunch of stuff. It was a lot. So I do want to not say anything, because there's got to be questions or thoughts, and please, it's like better than okay to even debate. Like, don't believe me. Yes.
Okay, I'll talk. I've got two things. One of which is I kind of get the drift that if something garbage is happening to me, that I did something in the past, right? I can hypothesize that. Um, and it seems like that for me, there's a certain inevitability about it. I can't escape that. So that's interesting to me. The other thing is, I keep thinking I must have really, really been like Mr. Trump in some of my life because I have so much edginess about his behavior. So that's another little realization I work on. And interestingly enough, because of that, I kind of focus on him as a subject for bodhicitta, because otherwise my focus is not a very negative one. So there's that. Um, So, yeah, that's the only thing I can remember at the moment. Oh, except when you said to therapize yourself. And I have found that that's something, fortunately, I've kind of naturally been able to do long before doing much with Buddhism, is I could do introspection a lot. And, um, and that was more to sort of calm my soul down than anything else, figure out what I did wrong, and in a sense, yes, I agree with you. You can't always go to somebody and say, "Oh my God, I really messed this up, mate." But rather, I can just send them good thoughts, so to
Yeah.
speak. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the best I can
Sometimes
do.
that's what we can do. And if that's the best we can do and we do that, then that's good. That's movement in the
Well,
right direction.
in fact, I'm thinking it's probably better than me trying to engage in a conversation about whatever, because it would
It
probably go to garbage as well. So, yeah, no, I'm safer with that approach. I
can
mean,
be. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So those are some of my thoughts about it. So yeah, I appreciate the conversation. It's helpful.
Oh, I love, and you say Trump, but it's always someone. Back in the day, I remember, talking to someone else and, they were ranting about George Bush. And I
Yeah,
was like, well, maybe you should put his picture on your altar. Like, I mean, as Dharma friends, it's like, hey, and if we look and if we see someone and we think that they're really doing a lot of terrible, terrible things,
yeah,
if we understand these ideas, then wow, they really do deserve our compassion.
yeah,
And we're saying every living being deserves our compassion. And then we
yeah,
see someone that looks so, they look evil. Like, wow, the suffering, if it's true, the suffering that they're creating for themselves is just incredible. Right. And, we could say, well, I'm exhausting my negative stuff, like, bad things happen to me. And provided I can not develop a negative mind, you could say, okay, that karmic debt is gone unless I do something to perpetuate it. Right. So sometimes having something negative happen to us can be a blessing. It's like the elimination of something. There was another thought that I had when you were talking about him specifically, is just the fact that we're seeing these people in our world and having the feelings that we have towards them. I don't know if you were, oh yeah, you were here last week. We are talking about, having that spiritual paranoia, like maybe everyone's enlightened except for me. And everything they're doing is like, maybe this being that looks like they're doing all these negative things are doing it to get me to do something, to get me to not want to be like that, or to get me to be more involved in helping someone else, all of those kinds of things. So it's complicated, right?
So I'm very grateful for his counseling me in the manner he does. Yeah, assuredly. Thank you.
Yeah. We all have those things, right? And it's always someone funny. It's always someone, and they're always the worst one. Michael, did you want to add something or
Shayla just told me she expected to see a picture of Donald Trump on my altar.
yeah, seriously. Seriously.
Sure.
Especially when we think about these laws of karma. Anybody else want to comment or have any thoughts? Anything? Okay. So yeah, it's a huge topic. And I just want to focus on, the two things of like remembering, if we just remember the completion of a karmic act, or the completion of a karmic path, is at the end, like owning it and like being glad about it, right? Like, oh yeah, I did that. So regret is the opposite of that. So the good news is, even if we've done negative things, if we're not rejoicing in them, if we're not thrilled that we did these negative things, right away, it weakens that karma. It can't be as powerful. There are what they call, and I don't really know that it's appropriate for this class, but I'll throw it out there. There's these 5 heinous acts that they say are particularly heinous, because they will, and again, it's functional. Why are they heinous? Because they're immediately next rebirth, you're going directly to hell. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. That's why they're heinous, because they function to immediately have a heavy negative rebirth result. And what they are is killing our mother, killing our father, if you want to wonder why. So we talked about the kindness of the mother, right? And wanting to repay that kindness. Like, these are the two beings that are responsible for the material cause, of this life, this precious human, this great opportunity that we have. You could say they gifted us that. So those are particularly heavy actions. And then killing an arhat, so a being who has achieved nirvana, killing them would be immediately landing someone in hell. Causing a schism, which we're not even eligible to do, because you would have to be like in a particular time, like of the Buddha, at a particular time, between the first teaching and the Buddha's parinirvana, and you'd have to be a fully ordained monk. So none of us are even eligible for it. And then the last one is drawing blood from a Buddha with malice. And I like mentioning them just because I think it's like peeling the onion as we're trying to, and I think it's okay to say in Buddhist circles, as we're trying to perfect ourselves, because this thing that sounds like from a Western psychological perspective to be a really sick thing, like you can never be perfect, which also I would agree. I can never be perfect as the kind of being I am now. But that is what we're trying to do. So thinking about these and then saying, okay, or if I look at the 10 non-virtues, no killing, no stealing, sexual misconduct, lying, divisive speech, harsh speech, idle speech like gossip, covetousness, jealousy, ill will, wrong view, like not believing in karma, just flat out not believing in past and future lives, not believing in the Four Noble Truths, those kinds of things. If we just take those and say, okay, if I'm trying to perfect myself, okay, I'm not killing and I'm not stealing, but starting to look at what am I doing that's in that constellation of those things? What am I doing that's close to those things? Am I not respecting life? Am I not even, it's interesting, people do so many things to like make their bodies healthy. Some is just like a egotistical thing. But, conversely, I could say, okay, well, they're just being vain or whatever, but also at some level, you could say healthy eating, you could say is a way of trying to protect life, valuing my own precious human rebirth. And then thinking about, oh, if I disrespect my own life by taking crazy chances, like, I don't know. If anything I would say could be bad, but if I do something that I consider to be crazy, that I myself consider to be crazy and dangerous, just for a 10-minute thrill, bungee jumping or something. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with bungee jumping. Let me just be clear. I'm just trying to think of an example. But if I think that that's like a dangerous thing, and I'm willing to do that for a 10-minute thrill, then maybe I'm planting some seeds of not valuing this great opportunity I have as a human being. So all of this stuff becomes food for thought. And it's not even that necessarily you're going to derive the correct answer, but it is in the investigation that we are learning ourselves. What are my motivations? Why do I do the things that I do? And it makes it so much easier then to clean up our karmic act and to be able to very genuinely, looking at, and again, looking at things, we can say, I want to purify the negative karmas that I know that I've committed in this life. Like I can remember last week I was rude or did something that I regret, and I can do 4 powers to purify that. But I can also do 4 powers to say, ooh, I'm getting a result similar to the cause, which means I must have done these things. I'm going to use this as an opportunity. I'm going to regret, and I'm going to apply 4 powers to the thing that I must have done to be getting the crappy thing I'm experiencing now. And that is so powerful. Like then you could actually exhaust before those seeds that are like that have an opportunity to fully ripen as like a rebirth or something really terrible. You can very quickly like kind of like accelerate them and then experience a small result instead of some large result that's so unmanageable, if that makes sense. And because this is so complicated, I do feel like, oh, it's too much for one class, but I really would love to give opportunities because I got to think there's some questions or some challenges. Maybe not. But this is also the great anonymous Zoom call. So it's a perfect, yes, yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So I'm having some struggles with Shayla, for example.
Uh-huh.
And because now, obviously, I could, if any struggles I had with Shayla, they would clearly be my problem, not hers. No, but if I was, and I did what you were talking about, that I did this dedication, and and I made the thing, and things changed for the next 6 months. But then they go back to
Yep.
the way we were. That's about me being the same person, right?
Yes.
That's not because when I do things, I expect Shayla to be different. I expect Jay to be different. I expect somebody else. I expect the other person to be different. It's about changing myself. And if things go back to the same place, it's because I've drifted back, not because the other person has good, bad, or indifferent.
It's actually, I don't know, better or worse than that. It is that, but it's also that maybe you did, maybe you didn't, maybe you did stay better, but we are carrying lifetimes of baggage, right? So maybe you actually have cleaned up your act. Maybe you are being different, but there they and I will tell you, as a person who has like lived in a Dharma center and has been close with multiple different sanghas, the example you gave is just so not silly. Like, really amazing people, really good practitioners have really challenging times with each other. And it is like, it's so common. It is so common. And so it's not a bad example. And I think also, as you we talked about this again when we were going through 8 verses, as we do become better and better, those beings who are the irritators or the people we have problems with, they do become rarer and rarer. Where you're right on though about you're the same, like you're still a suffering being, you're not enlightened, so you're still eligible to be experiencing the fruits of the karma, because we still have karma. And even after we've seen emptiness directly, we still can experience the results of all that stuff. We just won't react to it in the same way. Once we've cut that, entered the stream, because we've cut the root of ignorance with wisdom that sees emptiness directly, we're still eligible to experience the results of our yucky karmas, but we're not going to do anything in response that's going to create more of it. So we're not going to react out of ignorance. But it's interesting because Buddhas are in a Buddha paradise. They are surrounded by, and I might be wrong, but I want to say 10th level bodhisattvas and higher are all the beings in their world, their universe. They are in a Buddha paradise, and I'm here suffering. So yes, when I perfect myself, I would be forced to experience other living beings as in a different way than how I experience them now. So I'll just throw that out there. And Jay, I think you had something that you wanted to say. And Michael, I don't know if that's yes, and more. Jay, did you have something?
Yeah. One of the things I wanted to sort of like highlight or explore, sometimes with particularly Tibetan Buddhism, FPMT style, almost any of them, it's like I hear some really heavy shoulds into the story. Huh? And I don't think that's the pathway that Buddha intentioned. I don't want to speak for him, but, but that's my impression. So I'm wondering if you can talk to that a bit.
Yeah, I think it really is. What I said earlier is really the truth. Buddhist morality applies to me. It applies to me, period. And that's really challenging. It is my job. Yucky things happen to me, not to be a victim, to take some kind of responsibility and to use that, right? Like use it as fuel for my spiritual path. But, even I say should, but it's more like it's a hypothetical should if I want these things to happen. But, and not that I never catch myself with a should, because I do, I remember a long time ago, I was at maybe it wasn't so long ago, but I recall a time where I was in a place for a Buddhist empowerment. And so all of these people who are there had made these great efforts to like go to this place to get this empowerment. And, we're all being told there were things that were happening, and then we had periods of time where we had to wait for things. And of course, we're told, to be quiet and be mindful and try to meditate or study during this time. And, and I look around and there's a bunch of people, they're goofing off, they're doing things. So I start looking around and I start noticing, I'm taking the inventory of everyone else who's there. And I'm thinking, what a bunch of jerks. Honestly, I was thinking they're not doing what we were told to do this. I'm shooting all over in my head. I mean, at least I kept it to myself. But then I realized I caught myself doing this. And it's like, wow, I'm in an environment that is, I'm supposedly here for these because I want to become a bodhisattva, because I want to become a Buddha, because I want to develop love for every living being. And here I am, probably, I mean, it's in samsara, but in samsara, it's probably one of the best places I could be, surrounded by other people who want that same thing. And I can't help but look around and notice and judge and be annoyed. And it was a wake-up call for me. It was a wake-up call for me. So yeah, I do it. I have done it. But it's not how I want to be or who I want to be. And I think really the only thing is, if you take anything, I'm aligned with my higher self when I really remember this applies to me, period.
Yeah. It's a pity I don't have a camera because I was cracking up as you were talking about that, about your judgmentalness, because needless to say, I too can slip into this. And
Yeah. I notice other people being judgmental.
so
Yeah.
I definitely reverberate to that issue. Thank you.
And when I talking about the five heinous actions, drawing blood from a Buddha with malice, or killing an arhat, or causing a schism, I think especially these are things that we're not going to do those, right? But these are things that those of us who are spiritual practitioners, or moving in these circles and really working on this stuff, these are the things that are really dangerous for us. These are the things that we really will do. So we won't cause a schism, but we might do little divisive things, or, we might want the lamas to like us more, and we might point out someone else's faults, not in a nasty way, just like, oh, I pray for them because they're so X, Y, or Z, these are all things I've seen, and honestly, they're all things I've done. And they're all really dangerous, stupid things. So yeah, this is honestly, this is the stuff that this is where we're in danger. This is where we can help each other, though, so I think it's always like a really good Buddhist friend that will listen to you, kvetch about whatever's going on. And then when the timing is right, not because you should, and not in some judgmental, and actually maybe more with the spirit of wanting to help you, but with the suspicion that maybe you're helping me by providing a cause for me to tell you what I need to hear myself. And I will tell you that for me is the experience of teaching a Dharma class. Is there's nothing like, I'm not so great, and I'm not saying anything that you couldn't hear from somewhere else. It's this amazing opportunity that I get to say to you what I need to hear myself say and what I need to do. All the shoulds on this one. Yeah. Anybody else? Okay. I really wanted to talk a little bit about emptiness, which is also kind of a joke, because I mean, karma in one class and really insufficient job. I think maybe it's better not to do that. And maybe that also helps create the cause to maybe be able to connect again at some point in the future and talk about more of these ideas. Yeah, because I think the karma is a lot. And I if you didn't, there's lots of other teachings that you can get on this topic, but just remembering maybe those four things, the ways that it ripens, the four principles of karma, a completed karmic path, and really, really important, those four powers. And then remembering that all of that pertains to good things and negative things, right? So don't regret the good things that we do. I got to click on this. And say, if it's okay, I'm going to save it for later because I don't want to. Oh, nice. Thank you.
It's Thich Nhat Hanh talking about emptiness is not nothingness, and it's a very nice little discussion that he
Oh,
does. And
really
it's 7 minutes and 15 seconds. So
perfect. And it's so not nothingness. If it was nothingness, we wouldn't have to worry about this karma stuff, right? Like it would not be a concern. So last week I did mention that I kind of wanted to do a Tonglen meditation, and I try to close these out with some kind of meditation, usually related, again, tying together the time that we have now to our motivation, so that so we did plant seeds tonight, just being here, the conversation, paying attention, your time, your energy, all of those things are big karmas. And so dedicating those so that they ripen in the way that we want them to ripen. And so I thought maybe we do a very, super abbreviated Tonglen meditation, because it is one of the ways, we talked last week about, the different ways of developing that mind of bodhicitta. And so it's one of the classic methods. And I think afterwards, I'll guide us through a very quick version, but what I would ask is focus on the last part, when you have taken the suffering and you have filled that other living being with every good thing, every happiness, everything that they need, everything they could ever want. And then allow yourself to really feel what that would feel like, and dedicate, when we dedicate it towards achieving that enlightenment, being able to be that kind of being. So I'm going to do a quick, and I'm also going to make sure that my because I had an alarm set to remind me, and I don't want it to go off when we're doing a meditation. So let's take a minute and bring to mind someone. It could even be yourself. If you want to think about someone who's been challenging, or think about someone that you know very well, intimately. And just think for a minute about the details of their life. Maybe some things look like they have a really easy, good time, but you know that they have suffering. Think about all the kinds of suffering they have that you know about. If they have negative qualities, then you can ask yourself where those would be coming from. And we know that every living being has sickness, and eventually death before them. So it's certain that they will at some point be ripped from everything that they love. No matter who they are, every being has had loneliness. Everyone wants to be loved and happy. Everyone has disappointments, hurts. Everyone has limitations, the things they want. Sometimes they try to get them in negative ways and only end up harming themselves more. Imagine how wonderful it would be if we could take that away from them, all that suffering. Like, really, what a difference that would make. How would they be in the world if their suffering was completely eliminated? And then if we use our wisdom and we think about karma, the things we just talked about, we could say that all of their suffering came from the same place as our own suffering, some kind of ignorance, self-centeredness. So imagine now with every inhalation that you are drawing from them all of that negativity. Like each time you breathe in, it's pulling some of that negativity from them. And you can imagine it like a black cloud of smoke. Just let that gather. With every breath, imagine it like a rumbling black cloud in front of your face. And then when you imagine that their entire body and mind is then completely cleansed of all that negativity and suffering, and it's just right there in front of you, this powerful black cloud. And then shifting our focus for a moment to that fact of the suffering coming from ignorance and self-cherishing, all the things that motivate negative actions that harm us and others. And just acknowledge that you have that I have that. I have that little hard kernel of selfishness at my own heart. I don't want to have it, but I do. So thinking of this black rumbling cloud of negativity and how powerful it is. Let's use that power. Let's use that power to destroy that little seed of ignorant selfishness at my own heart. So we're not going to take on the suffering. We're going to use that suffering. We're going to send it to the enemy, the real enemy, our own ignorant selfishness. And so just imagine at the count of 3 that we breathe in that all that negativity, all that suffering. And that when it hits that little seed of selfishness, that kernel of ignorance at our own hearts, that it completely obliterates it. And like an atomic explosion, just fills our entire body with light. And so on the count of 3, 1, 2, 3. Really feel that warmth and light is just radiating out from you. That selfishness, that ignorance, everything that holds you back, completely destroyed. And now that person you were meditating on, imagine them in front of you, and that light and warmth is filling them. And imagine on those rays of light, you're sending them every good thing, every happiness, health and love and wisdom, compassion, completely filling their body and radiating out beyond them, and touching all the beings in your near physical vicinity. And the same thing, just that warmth and love, purifying them, bringing them joy. And then go beyond to your country, your world, this planet. Imagine it going beyond this planet, the rays of light and warmth radiating out to countless other planets. Filling all these beings with love and light, healing, and every good thing. And allow yourself to think that maybe this is what you are meant to do and be. It's the time we spent together tonight become a cause for just that. And then when you're ready, we can open our eyes and we'll do some dedication prayers. And thank you. Jangchub Samcho Rinpoche Ma Ke Panam Ke Gyuchi Ke Panyam Pa Me Pa Yang Gong ne gong du pelwa sho. Gong ri rawe korwe jinkan dir. Pendong de wa malu zhongwei ne. Chen rei zing wan ten zeng kiao tsu yi. Zha pe si te ba du ten gyur chi. Peerless teacher, an assembly of the children of the victorious ones, Sravakas and Pratyek Buddhas, victorious Losong, father and sons, along with the lineage masters, all the objects of refuge of infinite lands, please bestow the virtue and goodness of accomplishing this prayer here and now, holding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings. Through explanation and practice, you wore the armor of patience that is never discouraged. Incomparable, venerable Guru, to you I make request. While striving single-pointedly for the sake of the victorious one's teachings, the sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge, for your mother living beings, you suddenly departed to peace. What a great loss. Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truth of the blessings of the ocean of the three jewels and the great waves of bodhicitta of the children of the victorious ones, may the smile of a reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for fortunate disciples. Thank you so much for your time, everyone, and your good hearts. And I hope that our spiritual paths cross again and again and again. And yeah, thank you for the opportunity to spend this time with you. And may all of you and all of our teachers and everyone who supports our spiritual evolution have long and healthy lives, and may all of our good wishes and intentions come to full fruition. Amen.
Amen, sister. Woohoo.
Thank
Thank you.
you so much.